The moon hung like a silver dollar in the desert sky when Sister Evangeline first whispered those words that would change everything. But to understand why a woman of God would speak such darkness to a stranger, you must first know about the blood on her hands and the weight of secrets buried beneath the chapel floor. The desert wind carried dust and whispers across the abandoned mission of San Rafael. Sister Evangeline knelt in the courtyard, her black habit flowing around her like spilled ink against the pale sand. The rosary beads clicked softly between her fingers as she prayed, but her words felt hollow tonight, empty as the dried well behind the crumbling chapel walls. She had been alone here for 3 months now, 3 months since the other sisters had fled, leaving her to tend the mission by herself. They said it was too dangerous, too isolated, too far from God's protection, but Evangeline knew the truth. She wasn't staying to serve God, she was staying to hide from him. The sound of hoofbeats made her look up. A figure approached through the desert heat, wavering like a mirage in the moonlight. As he drew closer, she could make out the wide brim of a cowboy hat, the gentle sway of a man comfortable in the saddle. His horse moved slowly, carefully, as if both rider and beast were weary from a long journey. The stranger dismounted near the mission's gate. He was tall and lean, with kind eyes that seemed to hold their own stories of loss. His name, she would later learn, was Samuel Cross, but in that moment, he was simply a man seeking shelter in the desert night. "Evening, sister," he said, tipping his hat respectfully. His voice was soft, weathered by wind and time. "I was hoping you might have room for a traveler tonight. My horse needs rest, and I could use a moment's peace myself." Evangeline rose slowly, brushing dust from her habit. Something about this man stirred memories she had tried to bury. The gentle way he spoke, the careful distance he maintained, as if he understood that a woman of God required respect. It reminded her of another man, in another time, before she had taken her vows. "The mission welcomes all who seek sanctuary," she replied, though her voice carried an edge of caution. "There's hay for your horse in the stable, and I can offer you bread and water." Samuel nodded his thanks and led his horse toward the stable. As he walked away, Evangeline noticed the way his shoulders carried some invisible weight. She recognized that burden. It was the same one that kept her awake at night, staring at the ceiling of her empty chapel. Later that evening, Samuel sat by a small fire in the courtyard while Evangeline served him simple fare. The flames danced between them, casting shifting shadows on the adobe walls. Neither spoke for a long time, but it wasn't an uncomfortable silence. It was the quiet of two souls who had learned that words could sometimes do more harm than good. "You've been alone here long," Samuel finally observed. It wasn't a question. 3 months, Evangeline confirmed, settling onto a wooden crate across from him. The other sisters felt called elsewhere. "And you didn't." She looked into the fire, watching the flames consume the dry wood. "I have my reasons for staying." Samuel studied her face in the firelight. Reasons or regrets? The question hung in the air like smoke. Evangeline felt something crack inside her chest, a wall she had carefully built beginning to crumble. There was something about this stranger that made her want to speak truths she had never voiced aloud. "There was a man," she began quietly, "before I took my vows. His name was Marcus, and he was everything I thought I wanted. Charming, handsome, full of grand plans for the future." Samuel waited, sensing there was more to come. He was also dangerous. I didn't see it at first. The way he treated others when he thought no one was watching. The violence that simmered just beneath his smile. She paused, her hands trembling slightly. "I should have left him, should have seen the signs, but I was young and I thought love could change anyone." "What happened?" Evangeline's voice dropped to barely above a whisper. "He killed a man in town, shot him down in cold blood over a card game, and when the sheriff came looking... She closed her eyes. "Marcus used me as a shield, put his gun to my head and threatened to kill me if they didn't let him go." Samuel's jaw tightened, but he remained silent. "They let him go," she continued. "For my sake, they let a murderer walk free. And 3 days later, he killed again. A family this time, father, mother, 2 children." Tears began to track down her cheeks. "Their blood is on my hands as surely as if I had pulled the trigger myself." Samuel leaned forward, his eyes filled with compassion. "That's not true. You were a victim, not an accomplice." "Was I?" Evangeline's voice turned sharp, bitter. "I could have fought back, could have told them to take the shot. Instead, I chose my own life over justice, and innocent people died for it. You chose to survive. There's no shame in that, isn't there?" She stood abruptly, pacing to the edge of the firelight. "I joined the convent thinking I could atone, thinking I could pray away the guilt, serve God until he forgave me. But it doesn't work that way, does it? Some sins follow you no matter how far you run." Samuel was quiet for a long moment. When he finally spoke, his voice was heavy with understanding. I know something about running from the past. Evangeline turned to look at him, and for the first time, she really saw the pain in his eyes. I was a sheriff once, he said. Little town called Redemption Creek. Had a deputy named Jake Morrison. Good man, family man. And I got him killed. How? There was an outlaw we'd been tracking. Name of Marcus Steele. Evangeline's breath caught at the familiar name. Dangerous man. Killed at least 6 people that we knew of. We finally cornered him at a farmhouse outside town. I should have waited for backup, but I was eager. Wanted to be the hero. Samuel stared into the fire, lost in the memory. Jake went around back while I took the front. But Steele had a hostage. Young woman, pretty thing. He was using her as a shield. Gun pressed to her head. Evangeline's heart began to race. I hesitated. Samuel continued. Couldn't take the shot with her in the way. And while I hesitated, Steele put a bullet through Jake's heart. Then he escaped with the woman. And 3 days later, he looked up at Evangeline, and she saw the moment of recognition in his eyes. 3 days later, he killed the Morrison family, Jake's wife and 2 little girls. The fire crackled between them as the full weight of their connection settled in. They had both been broken by the same man, their lives forever altered by Marcus Steele's violence. The woman, Samuel said quietly. The hostage, that was you, wasn't it? Evangeline nodded, unable to speak. I've been looking for you for 3 years. Samuel continued, not to blame you, but to apologize, to tell you that what happened wasn't your fault. But it was, Evangeline whispered. Don't you see? We're both responsible. You for hesitating, me for not being brave enough to stop. Samuel's voice was firm but gentle. He stood and walked to her, stopping just outside arm's reach. We were both victims of a violent man who cared nothing for human life. The guilt we carry, the weight of those deaths, that's what he left us with. That's how he continues to hurt people even from the grave. He's dead. 6 months ago, hanged for his crimes. Samuel's voice was steady, but his poison lived on in us. In the guilt we carry, the way we've punished ourselves. Evangeline felt something shift inside her, like a door long sealed finally creaking open. Then why are you here? If you found him, if justice was done, why seek me out? Samuel was quiet for a long moment, studying her face in the moonlight. Because I realized something. The dead don't need our guilt. They need our healing. They need us to live, to find peace, to honor their memory by not letting one evil man destroy the rest of our lives. That night, as Samuel prepared to sleep in the chapel, Evangeline stood at her window, looking out at the desert bathed in silver moonlight. For the first time in 3 years, the weight on her chest felt lighter. She thought of Jake Morrison, the deputy she'd never met, but whose death she'd carried like a stone in her heart. She thought of his wife and daughters, innocent victims of Marcus Steele's cruelty, and for the first time, she allowed herself to grieve for them without drowning in guilt. A soft knock at her door interrupted her thoughts. She opened it to find Samuel standing in the hallway, hat in his hands. I wanted to thank you, he said, for telling me your story, for helping me understand that we were both just people caught in the path of something evil. Evangeline looked at this man who had carried the same burden she had, who had searched for her not for revenge but for redemption. In his eyes, she saw reflected the possibility of forgiveness not from God, but from themselves. Samuel, she said softly, and it was the first time she had spoken his name aloud. The sound of it felt like prayer. They stood there in the doorway, 2 broken people who had found in each other a path toward healing. The desert wind whispered through the mission walls, carrying away some of the weight they had both carried for so long. Your God cannot save you from me, Evangeline whispered, but her voice held no threat. Instead, it carried the weight of recognition, of 2 souls who had found each other in the wilderness of guilt and grief. But perhaps we can save each other from ourselves.